All right, so this is the Bushido podcast, episode 5 with Klaudia, my good friend who I met in India a few years back. She's an absolute gem and a yoga master in my estimation. So, Klaudia, you want to go ahead and give people a little background on you? And then we were already talking offline and getting into some deep shit. So I wanted to start us recording so we would be getting this stuff on the recording. So go ahead.
Okay, sorry. Hey everyone, thank you, Levi. So I'm from Slovakia, and I basically straight after high school, I left to university in Prague, but I always had this vision of the jungle in my mind and everywhere around me in a way. And so after a year and a half of university, I left and I quit everything. I quit my job, my school, my community, my family, and everything. And I just went to Nicaragua, and it's basically that was I think 5 or 6 years ago. And since then, I've just been traveling, and I've been doing yoga since I was 16, and so it's been 11 years, almost 12 years, and in a way, it's become my whole life. But then also, I moved beyond that and past that, and I spent a few years in the jungle and just living barefoot and sleeping on the ground. And then I went to India 3 years ago. That's where we met with Levi, and I did trainings. Basically, I did a few trainings in different styles of yoga, and I don't know, I kept traveling, and I went through Dark Nights of the Soul, and I did a lot of stuff.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good intro. Doesn't have to be
Yeah.
anything too deep, but yeah, you want to pick up. We can pick up just on what we were talking about. I think I was basically saying with the internet and social media nowadays, they're really these pretty incredible tools that we have. Essentially, the the knowledge of mankind at our fingertips that we can use, and but it can also kind of be a dangerous tool, especially with probably had mentioned the movie The Social Dilemma. I think that came out a few years ago. I remember watching that.
Yeah.
And yeah, basically social media, it's designed by the engineers to be addictive in pretty much the same way as drugs or anything really. I mean, the dopamine system originally, it was, designed in terms of a species animal level of like, oh wow, food and sex is good. Of course it's going to do that because evolutionarily the animals that, or the human beings that was rewarded for, were the ones that stayed alive and reproduced. So it's kind of like an evolutionary thing, but we've gotten to the point now with technology that basically they're kind of hijacking that system. And it's
Mm.
like, oh, you open up Instagram and there's like things are flashing, or the heart is like lit up, or oh, there's a message. And I think for me, what's interesting is until very recently, I would only have Instagram during the weekend, which I felt was like a
Mm.
nice balance for me, because it would be like, all right, get my stuff done during the week. And then the weekend, if I waste a little bit more time, it's okay. But now that I started the podcast, it's something I have to use for the podcast, of course, uploading content, stuff like that. So I'm a little, it's kind of entering into the challenge that I think most people face. And that's like, okay, I have this on my phone. How can I use this tool? How can I use it well to promote myself and my podcast and my brand, but without the negative aspects of like, okay, well, I just picked this up for 15 minutes or 20 minutes. And like we were saying, 20 to 30 minutes, that's actually a lot of time to be, you can get you that much closer to your goals. So what do you think,
Mm.
Klaudia? What are your thoughts?
I I can see that it's a beautiful way to manipulate people, though. It's a beautiful way to deplete everyone's dopamine so we don't do shit with our lives and we actually don't achieve anything. And 30 minutes is actually doesn't sound so bad, even like people spend hours. I know I can spend hours there. And yeah, I remember reading a story recently, and it was about a guy he didn't work, he wasn't going to school, he was just freely on social media, on his computer, on his phone, and they just did an experiment when he just quit everything, and I think it was within 25 days he was back to work and he was like fully back in life, just because his dopamine was not depleted, so he actually had the motivation to do stuff, to do things in his life. And but this is not what the society, like this is not how we stay controllable, you know.
Yeah, I agree. And I think another interesting thing that I've noticed, so I started a different Instagram page for my podcast. And so then now that Instagram, the algorithm is basically restarted. So obviously with my personal page, when I go to that search menu, it knows all the things I like. It's going to put like jujitsu stuff and, you know, traveling stuff and stuff like that. But then um, when I go to the other page, it doesn't really know. So it's basically just like throwing out random shit to try to like see what I'll click on, or like the algorithm, like it doesn't even matter if you click on it, even if you just scroll and stop and you stop at one thing, it knows it's already, it's like it's recording you. It's like, oh, he stopped at this, he must be watching this video, he likes this. And so what freaks me out is like I'll go to that and it'll be like shooting me pictures of like girls and like girls in bikinis and stuff. And I'm like, wow, you know, like this is how they get you, you know? It's that, and that's it's I mean, I mean the algorithm doesn't know. It's literally just aggregating things, but it's probably
Just
like
set
it's just
system.
saying like, okay, what are they gonna look at? But I see it and I'm like, oh shit. And I'm like, wow, that's freaky, you know, because that it's basically just gonna put anything in front of you that you want to see. And I think this is also, I remember,
To keep you there, right?
yeah, exactly. And I remember
Yeah.
this one thing they were talking about where basically this algorithm leads to polarization because it keeps showing people more and more extreme things. And so it's like, oh, you are into whatever thing, and then it's going to show you something a little bit more extreme along that same lines. And so I think this was actually a YouTube algorithm, but basically the study, maybe it wasn't a study, it was someone just doing an experiment, but they just kept on going. And they were like, okay, if I basically match the algorithm and I watch anything it shows me, basically it would just keep sending you more and more and more extreme stuff, to where it's like, okay, well, maybe it's not that much of a question why our societies are becoming so polarized, or I can speak for the US at least. Why it's so polarized is because you have these people, basically they live in a bubble. Imagine you are surrounded by people that are like you and you get on Instagram and it's just promoting stuff that is what you believe. And then you're like, then you're not even exposed to other thoughts. So it's basically a situation where you hear someone else's opinion and you're like, how can you even believe that? That's crazy, because people haven't even been exposed to other thoughts. Whereas back in the day, maybe, I mean, if you were really to take it back in the day, I mean, we would live in tribes. And so you would basically have your little tribe and you would be exposed to different viewpoints and opinions. Whereas now it's the reverse. Basically, your tribe and social media is people that think like you and people that believe the same things you do. So yeah, anyways,
Yeah, I mean I've heard about that a lot, but also it's not my experience. And it's the thing is the what you are interested in is going to show more of that. So if you want like educational stuff, psychology, whatever you're interested in, it's going to show more of that because that's how it keeps you there, right? So you can also choose to have really good stuff up there, and it's not going to prevent you from not spending time there. But also, I know I'm following pages that they promote actually being open to ideas, being open to different opinions and all of that. And it's also, I think it's about being conscious of who you are following, and what I'm doing, and I also see people doing. You follow people who have opinions very different from you, and you just listen to that, and you see how you feel inside when you listen to that. And yeah, so I think it's also like very much, you can, in a way, you can curate it yourself.
Yeah, and I completely agree. But I think that takes, like you mentioned before, that takes a lot of self-awareness. And if you were to consider,
Yeah, that's what we want though, right?
yeah, but if you consider the average person, if we're being honest, are they really that intentional? Are they that intentional?
No, but with nothing. That's the thing though. Like when you look at 98% of humanity, like everyone is manipulating. No one is aware that they are aware. No one is aware that they can make decisions, that they are even stuck in a system. They don't know that they are being manipulated. They don't know that we are, like, just because we don't hear the orders doesn't mean that they are not here and we are not following them.
So well said.
And it's not just the Instagram and social media, it's everywhere. Like this is just one little symptom of that.
I think social media would probably be like we were talking about before, there's the iceberg, and like social media is just like the tip of the iceberg that we see, and it gets a lot of attention.
Yeah.
But there's like a whole cultural and societal issues that are
Yeah.
kind of forming at that little top of the iceberg. But kind of
Yeah,
what you
totally.
mentioned about being intentional and curating what you see, um, I kind of have a cool experience with that because I had never used Twitter before. But then since I got into Bitcoin a couple of years ago, it's Bitcoin Twitter. That's like what they call it. It's like the community on Twitter that's all into Bitcoin. And I've been like very,
Okay.
very intentional on my Twitter account of what I follow. So it's basically like I think I follow at this point probably about 200 people. And that has been like it's like literally every time before I follow someone, I'm very specific. Like I don't even stuff that I think is like funny, I try not to follow because it's like I want everything on my Twitter feed to be like high signal. So I do follow a couple
Mm.
of like political comedic satire accounts, but for the most part, it's mainly like macroeconomics, geopolitics, Austrian economics, Bitcoin, stuff like that. And I do notice a big difference of if I'm going to spend time on
Mm.
social media, what I try to do is like my default should be to go to Twitter because if I'm going to waste time, which I don't think, especially with this, I'm not wasting time because I have learned a shit ton from the people that are on there. But I think it just gives a really good example of exactly what you're saying of like you can curate what
Mm.
you see. And then also even on Instagram, like you can click on stuff and be like, don't show me this. I mean, you have to be pretty, like we were saying, you have to be pretty aware and awake. But like if I'm on my personal feed and Instagram starts showing me a picture of like girls and this and that, like I click on it and I'm like, don't show me that. But once again, like that takes a lot of awareness to be
Mm.
like that because it's they're tapping into your dopamine system and they want to try to like get, I don't know, but I kind of see it as like it's kind of like a challenge, like, no, fuck you. I'm not going to look at this stuff, just because it's presented to me, like get that out of here. So the option is there.
Mm.
They provide for that in the system, but it's takes
Yeah.
a lot of self-awareness.
Yeah, I mean, it's really important because that's our diet, and this is what is actually programming us and the way we think and the way we are, and it's programming our frequency in a way. So it's super important. But also the way Instagram is set up right now, it's like it's going to show you completely random stuff that like suggested accounts that don't sometimes don't even have much to do with what you normally follow. So it's getting tricky.
Yeah, I think that's probably like the right word is tricky. it's a tool. It can have benefits to stay connected and see what your friends are up to, and that's great. But it also can be dangerous and, hijack your dopamine system. I mean, for me, I would just kind of bring it around to how we started, and it's it's a tool. You can use the internet to learn how to play guitar. You can learn a language. You can learn some amazing things, or you can literally watch cat videos for hours. So it's just like any power, or I mean, anything really. There's two sides of it. And if you have the self-awareness to wield that tool and power effectively, you can be absolutely unstoppable. And this is kind of how we got on this initially. I think you were saying how focused I am when it comes to doing things. And for me, like when it comes to doing something, I'm like laser focused. Let's fucking go. I'm not bullshitting around. Like I'm gonna do this and I'm gonna do it well. And I think that it's really goes back to the same idea of, how do I express this properly? It's like if you can be focused and you have the tools that are available to you now, you can be an absolute, like you can just be unstoppable. But if you're not focused, then these tools they'll just take you for a ride. They'll wreck you. They will rob you of all your time, which if you really think about it, your time is all you have. Like your money is it's just time in another form. You traded your time for that money. So the money is like your life force. So it's basically like your time, your money. That's basically what you traded your finite amount of time you have on this earth. So, I mean, I think people just don't take it seriously. They're like, oh yeah, 30 minutes, an hour or more, like you said. But no, like this is dead serious. This is your one life that you have, you know, don't you have goals? Like, don't you have dreams that you want to accomplish? And if this time is being taken from you and you're not working towards, and it's not being directed at something, your dreams or your goals, then it's like, what the fuck? It's sad. And yeah, it's sad and kind of disgusting. Not saying that these people or social media is disgusting. It's just saying like, this is your finite time on earth. Like, get serious.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's distraction. Like, I think that's the main in the normal population. I think that's the main disease right now. We are all just so distracted.
Mm-hmm. I'm trying to think. Like.
Let me know if I'm getting too dark, man.
I mean, you're getting pretty dark, but
I am. Okay. I'm gonna go turn the lights off.
Okay, no worries. I can pause the. Yeah.
All right, cool.
Yeah. Well, actually, I mean, I think we've been on the Instagram and social media for a while. But now that you mentioned the blue light and artificial light, we can maybe move on to a different topic, one that's pretty relevant. So one of these guys I follow on Twitter, he's really into I don't know what you would call it, but just like good habits that align with how the human body is designed. And so one of the things, I think I saw this like last week, and he wrote that he does absolutely zero artificial light after sunset or like after dark. And so basically the past maybe 2 or 3 days, I've been turning off we turn off the lights at like an hour before bed, and also try to stay off the like phones and computers. Not that it's like totally, maybe I'll glance at it or send a text or something, but that has actually made a big difference. I'm surprised how much of a difference it's made, because like I'm naturally a night owl. So for me, it's hard to fall asleep early, and just hard to fall asleep, I would say, in general. And so turning the lights off, basically, I'm now, at least, this very short experiment, just the past few days, I'm now tired at around like 9-ish, which is good. And then when I've woken up the past few days, I feel rested. So it's literally like a big game changer.
Yeah,
So
totally.
yeah, I was kind of not blown away, but as someone who has struggled might be a strong word, but having good quality sleep and staying on a early to bed, early to rise, which is what I like. I like to be up before the sun comes up, and then when the sun sets, should probably be thinking about going to bed soonish. That to me seems the most natural rhythm. Um, yeah, turning the lights off has been a big help
Yeah.
for me.
For me, I've always been sensitive to light, and I was always sensitive to sounds as well. So also for me, after dark, I get so sensitive with the sounds as well, because naturally in nature, I like in forests, everything kind of calms down. Like we get so much more sensitive to sounds, and the light. I remember like when I was a teenager, and my parents would turn on the big light in the living room. I would put on a hat and sunglasses, and I was like, I cannot do this. Like this is it's literally like it. Even now, I can feel a headache coming on, and I think it's just like the more, well, we have like predisposition to be sensitive to some extent, but also the more you clean your body, um, within different ways and clean your mind and your system, the more sensitive we get. So we can also like curate this, but in a way it also becomes inevitable for me to use the blue light blocking glasses, for example, in airports when I cannot actually um, change the environment I'm in. Like normally I don't use the big light, I use candles, and it's perfect. um, yeah. And if I'm on the phone or I'm watching something, I'm always using the blue light blocking glasses.
Really? Okay. That's really interesting. I mean, I've
Yeah,
seen
totally.
those and I thought about getting some, but I wasn't sure if they were like legit. So do you know how
Honestly,
long
for
how long
me,
have you been
it
using them? When did you start doing that?
mm, like a year and a half, I think. Yeah, for me they were like when I was listening to podcasts and researching the information on blue light, everything was like, but this is what I've been saying for years. Like it's really what I've been feeling and how my body feels. Like all the science is just backing this up. And I think I don't remember the exact percentage, but if you like 20 or 40% every hour that we are exposed to blue light, which is the normal white light that you see, um, we are losing like 20 or 40% of melatonin every hour. So we are depleting our sleep hormone radically, and then we are surprised that we cannot sleep, or if we fall asleep, we wake up in the middle of the night and we cannot sleep again. Yeah, I just the way of the nature is the best, like surprise.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for me, I always just kind of like the going from first principles approach is I just say like, okay, well, for 99.9% of human evolution, we were like living in tribes and that would have been existing, out in nature. So when I think about how I can emulate that now, it's like, okay, well, if how can I say this properly? It's like how can I adjust things in my life to emulate that more? So for example, okay, the sun is down. I
Yeah.
probably shouldn't be, having lights on because all my body knows is okay, light in the sky. I guess it's daytime. Your body isn't your mind understands, but your body is like it's deeper than just the mind. It's a whole organism and machine that functions on I mean, you just look like why all those moths that go to the light that I mean, they think it's the moon. They orient based off the moon. So whenever the lights are on at night, they're like, oh, there's the
Mm.
moon. I need to go that way. And I think that is a perfect example. Like our bodies are functioning the same way. It's like, okay, light is on above me. I guess it's daytime. And then, I mean, I'll just speak for my
Mm,
part of
exactly.
yeah, I'll just speak to my part of it's like, wow, I'm on my phone or on the computer until 10 minutes before bed, and then I get in bed, I'm like, oh, why can't I fall asleep? But then, and then you like learn a little bit more. I'm like, well, duh, of course I can't fall asleep. Like I go from lights on, getting beamed
Yeah.
fucking like blue light and probably like interesting information. So my body thinks I'm like on the African savannah hunting lions, but and then I try to go to bed in like 5 minutes. Well, of course you can't like fall asleep, you know. Obviously,
Yeah.
like looking at it now, once you
Well,
go ahead.
so for me, honestly, the big lights like on the ceilings, I don't understand them. Like, why would you put up another sun after we go to bed, and then you expect to sleep normally? Like for me, it just makes no sense. But it is a lot of things in society for me, like naturally the way I feel, just don't make any sense.
Yeah, I think that is a perfect analogy, but it's just like one of those things you don't know. That's normal for us. So it's like, you know, you don't question it because it's like, well, where else like lights
Yeah,
and
when you are programmed.
yeah, yeah, light in, light up sky light, light in ceiling is good, you know. But then once you get a little bit more information, it's like, oh yeah, of course, that doesn't make sense. And I mean, you don't necessarily have to make huge adjustments. I mean, I think my mini experiment I've done the past few days is a perfect example of like, yeah, does this guy that I follow zero artificial light after dark? Is that optimal? Yeah, probably. And that's great and fucking awesome for him. But, you know, I think a lot of us don't necessarily operate or take for, like you said, with the airport, you can't necessarily always control your environment. So, what are some things you can do? Maybe like you turn off the lights an hour before bed, or like I just ordered some red light from my understanding, the red light doesn't affect those systems as in the same way. So it's like, okay, I'm gonna get a lamp.
I mean, it's the fire, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Sorry,
exactly.
go on.
No, I think we have like a little bit like a half second lag, but it's all good. But yeah, basically like a lamp, red light, and then it's like, okay, well, this is something that's a little more natural, like fire. Um, but it's just funny because we don't think of it because everything's normal, but then you start to dig a little deeper and you're like, actually, yeah, that bright white light at midnight is probably really awful for sending system. It's, you know, like sending mixed messages to your body.
The thing, like, even if you're not aware, like, our body is processing a millions of information every second, and this is one of the information it's processing that, okay, right now it's day because there's so much blue light. You can see with the sunrise, there's more red light. So if you go in the sun first thing in the morning, your body is going to receive information. Okay, what time of the day is it? It's going to reset your circadian rhythm, and same during the day. And then in the evening, when the sun sets, like again, the ratio of the blue of different light, like different colored light, is going to change, and it's going to again send signals to your system. So if we are absorbing blue light after dark, it's going to just confuse the whole system. And it's the same thing is with a lot of different things, like with the foods that we are eating, with the water we are drinking, the air we are breathing. Like all of this is information. And yeah.
Yeah, that's so well said. And I think you really may have been like ahead of your time on this because I think a lot of this stuff is really coming to light like now. I know for me at least, only since are you familiar with Andrew Huberman with the Huberman Lab podcast?
Mm-mm.
You
Mm-mm.
should check him out. I'll send you his podcast after this, but he talks about
Yeah, please.
a lot of this stuff. He's a researcher, a doctor in Stanford, which I mean, you know, Stanford, it's like a fancy university on the West Coast in the US. But this is a lot of the stuff
Of course I do.
he's
I know.
saying. Stanford, yeah, I know things. But basically, basically, this is all the stuff he's saying, but he's a researcher, so he's bringing up the studies and backing it up. But once you question it, it really just makes sense of like, yeah, of course I need to get sun in the morning and then it's good in the evening too. But you just don't think, because like you said, like we're programmed, and this is just the way you've been your whole life. So why would I do it any other way? But then there's just like a crack in the thing, and you're like, actually, this doesn't make sense. So I don't. For me, this is all stuff I've learned probably very
Mm.
recently, like just within the past 6 months. So I think you're really been ahead of your time. In with a lot of these practices.
I think, Till Swan, she said that if hyper or like highly sensitive people were the ones to set the society and to make everything the way they feel the best in society, we would function so much better. Everyone would be much happier. Everything would just work much, much better. And okay, I have a story in my mind that is going to like illustrate something. And it's a little bit different, but basically like many years ago when I was back in my like childhood bedroom, just before I woke up, because normally when we are asleep, like we are not conscious, we don't remember, so we just drop back in the body and we wake up, and then we are back in the 3D in the reality. But just like the millisecond before dropping in the body, I I remember that like glimpse of the soul like dropping in the body, and I could feel how the consciousness of the soul was completely pure. Like there was no preference, no opinions, like no gender. There was like it was pure slate, like a completely clean slate. And then when I dropped into the body, I started uploading all the information of who I am, like my name, identity, my family relationships, my trauma, like everything. And I could feel how for the soul, like relative to what she or whatever, like what she's experienced, how it's so strange. The society as it is right now on Earth, like the way the culture is right now is so fucking strange. It's just so weird the way the whole system works, like the way we have to work for money, to get food, to get a place to live on Earth that is actually free, like it's just free land, but just the whole culture, the whole society, the way it's set up. And I never forgot it. Like it's been many, many years, and I really believe like this is the way of like how they wanted me, when I say they, it's my guides or my higher self, whatever, wanted me to be aware of actually how strange this is, and not to, because we kind of identify and get lost in it, right? In the society, in the culture, we think this is the way it is, this is the way it's always been, this is the way it's always going to be. But actually, like the culture as it is right now, it's so fragile. Like, and a lot of teachings are saying that it's going to crumble in a few years, like very, very soon, actually. So, yeah.
Cool. No, thank you. Thanks for sharing. That's like a really cool story. I think kind of going off just what you said at the end of like our perception of the culture and our existence. It's just that like we're these finite beings with very finite access to information. I mean, comparatively speaking, we have access to more information than 99.9% of humanity has ever had in all of history. And yet, even with that, like we still have access to like a very small amount of the information. And I had a point I was gonna make, but now I forget. Oh, basically,
Well, it
like,
depends how. Sorry.
no, go ahead.
The information we have access to is limited to how connected we are in a way, or like where we are, what we are connected to, because in a way we have access to infinite information when we disconnect from the 3D, because this is very limited. But if we connect to something bigger, to like universal consciousness, let's say, we can get any information like this. It's like the universal Google is, and it's Google in a way that's the actually truth you're going to get, filtered through the body and the mind, so that we can actually understand it in this reality. But yeah, I think this is why it's so important to just like center yourself, to tune in with your own truth, because the information we are going to get from the outside, it's infinite, and like we cannot actually discern what is true. it's really impossible unless we are really connected to our gut or to our heart or just to love, like to feel what love is.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that these, at the end of the day, like even the words we use, I mean, these are just like sound waves that are utterances that we use to assign meaning. And really, like, although our language is an incredible technology that we've developed, it's way older than writing. You know, writing is a relatively recent development. So it's a beautiful piece of technology, and like even that, you and I, we have to speak the same language because there's different languages. You know, there's different technologies that have been developed to communicate ideas and meaning. But at the end of the day, like a perfect, it's not a perfect it doesn't capture the essence of ideas perfectly. Basically, I have an idea of, let's say, love, but like love, and then in Spanish, it's like amor. And those are two different words, but they're getting at the same idea, you know? And so we say this word. And so I have an idea in my head, I say the word, and then you receive the word, and then you process it back to your brain. But that there's so much room in between there for things to get lost in translation. You know, like what does love mean to someone that maybe has never tasted of true love? You know, maybe they think they know what love is. It maybe like when you're young, you know, and you have like your first girlfriend or boyfriend, and you're like, oh, I love you, or whoever you said that to. And in that moment, you think it's love, but then you get older and you're like, well, that wasn't really love, you know, love in like the deeper sense of the term. So,
Would it be easier if we could just transfer the feeling?
yeah. And I think that is like, I think everyone knows how when you're with like someone that you're like friends with, but you're not like really close with, you feel the need to like kind of talk and maintain a conversation and do that. But when you're with someone who like you've been friends for so long that you can literally just be together and you don't have to talk. And I think that's kind of getting at that idea of like we're communicating on a deeper level, you know, we're communicating on our presence, you know, like we're such good friends, like we don't need to just be making these utterances, we can just be in each other's presence. I mean, we're literally electricity, our heart is beating, we're literally electricity, we're beings that have our aura or aura. So that's the cool thing is like once you're really close with someone, like you can just be in the same, just to be in the presence, and that's communication.
Mm. And there are also people who you don't even have to be friends. And like for me, for example, I'm so sensitive to everything. And there's people who are so much more sensitive as well. Like then I have friends who there's gonna be a person who walks past them and they're like, oh wow, that was really intense. And it's the way we are open to feeling, right? It's just that it's how much can we process of like how aware can we be of the information that we are processing, because even if we are not aware, even if most people will not feel that intensely and so that much, the body is still processing the information. So even if after nothing happens in my own perception, but suddenly I feel shitty, then probably something has happened that I have not been aware of. But we can actually train ourselves to be aware of that. Like I think this is how we actually get out of like from that like programming of being a robot and just doing tasks that we have always been doing and everyone has always been doing around us, is becoming really sensitive and attuned to all these different sensory and like extra sensory experiences that is always happening. And then we can actually like the symbols, right, like language is just it's just symbols. Like how much information can we actually transfer in that way, and how much can we transfer when we are just in silence or even with touch. Like the touch transfers so much information. That's why in the cultures, like I'm in India right now, like no one is shaking hands or giving hugs, everyone just does this. And it's because they don't want to transfer that energy. Like when you touch someone, like there's so much exchange happening, and they know that.
That's so interesting. And I mean, I think at least what kind of comes to mind for me is like in our recent culture of like casual sex. And you can look at this as
Mm,
like it's like
yeah.
50, like something, we'll say that at least in the US, the sexual revolution was like 1970s. So it's like 50 years that it's been like this. But it's kind of crazy because it's like, even if you, let's not even talk about the physical of like, obviously you can literally transmit diseases between people through sex. Like that should be getting us to like the idea of like, there's something going on here that's more than just shaking hands, like the physical is hinting, it's giving us clues that more is happening than just two body parts touching, like there's more happening. And I would say like even more important than that, it's like the spiritual of like you're really enmeshing yourself spiritually with someone. And
Mm,
even the term like casual sex, that's kind of paradoxical because how casual can it be if you're literally inside of someone? Like as a male, like you're inside of someone, and a female, like someone's inside of you. That doesn't sound very
mm.
casual to me. Like if someone come and stuck their fucking finger in my mouth, I wouldn't be like, oh yeah, that's casual. We're just hanging out, you know? So
And that's not even close to how many like nerve endings there are in your mouth compared to your genitals, right? Like
mhm,
it's incomparable.
or
Yeah, but again, I think it just goes back to how desensitized we are. Because if we actually felt what was happening, like there's a lot of like in the communities where I am, there's a lot of like yoni healing and trauma releasing from the yoni. So like from the yeah, from the yonis, like from the womb space. And like there's so much trauma stored. And we are also very desensitized in that space, in that area because of that. And a lot of releasing that I have done and also like people around me do is a lot to do with the sexual partners we've had in the past. And we are actually carrying their stuff in our bodies until the moment that we actually release them.
yeah, yeah, it's pretty powerful. And I would say like
Yeah.
for me, I'm also a pretty sensitive person. I would say like my mom, if I were to say, let's transport ourselves back to pre pre-civilization time and we were living in tribes, I would say she would be something of like a medicine woman. That's kind of like her energy.
Mm.
And she's like inherently spiritual. And so I think I have that from her as well. And so it's kind of like the same thing where you're with someone and someone just passes by and you can be like, oh, wow, that was intense. And it's for us, it's like we're so considerate, like we're always considering other people, which is good and bad. It has its pros and cons, but like something that we talk about is like people don't consider us in the same way, but it's not necessarily even because they are rude per se. It's like they're not even tapped in to that same frequency. They don't even have the capacity or to be that considerate, like I don't know if I can
I
explain.
know what you mean, totally. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's totally that. It's totally that. No one is doing anything on purpose. Like everyone is just being the best version they can be in the moment. I mean, we are being them in a way. Like if we go back to the oneness, it's just they are doing the best they can. And if I was in their shoes with their history, I would be doing the exact same thing. So
Yeah, yeah, that's so true.
yeah.
Jordan Peterson, he has a really good thing. He talks about that, and it's like us looking back on history. I think it's called like presentism, where like we look back in history and judge the people in the past for it's like, oh, well, they had slaves, they were bad people, or they did XYZ. Or like he talks about the Nazis. He's like, if you were a Nazi, like if you were born in Germany during that time, you would have been a Nazi too. Like you're no better.
Mm.
These people were just using the information that they had at hand and making the best decisions that they could with the information that they had
Mm.
at the time. So I think it's like it's so presumptuous and so arrogant for us in modern times, like we have the internet, you have access to all of the history of mankind at your fingertips. Of course, you're more informed and can make better decisions, and people still fuck it up, you know. Like it's like, who are you to judge someone from 100 years ago who they might meet 1,000 people in their whole life, you know? If everyone around you was saying and believing the same thing, it's not like you just hop on Twitter and get a different viewpoint of someone from another country on the other side of the world. Like you would have believed that because that is the information that they were being fed. They were even more manipulated and controlled than we are now. So like it's so disingenuous for me when I hear that of like, oh, you know, they did this and that in the past, like they were bad people. It's like, no, fuck you. Like you have no context on the life that they lived, you know, have some compassion. And it's kind of like two sides of the same coin of like, you know, you don't want to judge people. Yeah, it's hard because like you don't want to judge people, but at the same time, it's like, hey, we're all dealing with the same like 24 hours in the day. So it's like this yin yang of like, you know, I'm not judging, and I would have done the same thing if I had the information, but you know, the power's in your hands to make a better life. So, you know, but if you're not awake, it doesn't matter. You know, it's like if someone's asleep, it doesn't matter if they have food and water, but because they're not even conscious, they're not awake to be taking intentional actions in their life.
Yes, and also it's not our responsibility, or it's not where our focus should even be. I feel like we should only just focus on ourselves, right? Like that's just the extent of where we can make a difference. It's just inside of us. So
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I think even now it's interesting because like we all have our family shit, and maybe we come from, you know, dysfunctional families or semi-dysfunctional, or maybe you come from a good family, but shit just happens, of course. Um, but something that's really exciting for me now that I'm considering like fatherhood and and having my own children and like starting the next generation is like it's my opportunity to do things right. You know, like my parents are divorced, my wife's parents, you know, they have their things, and that's fine. But we can heal by like starting a family, and we can do all the things that we wish we could have had. So like you heal not by focusing on yourself, but like it's like healing by saying, you know, like, okay, you know what, dad, whatever, like whatever happened or didn't happen, that's fine. At this point, I don't even care because I need to focus on me and my family and making the best life I can have for my kids. And I think that is, it's something I never would have understood or thought of until I started to contemplate entering into fatherhood. And it's like, wow, this is really exciting because this is my time to heal by doing things right. It's like, yeah, does that make sense?
yeah, totally. Yeah,
Yeah. All right. Well, we can just keep ripping. That's good. It's good.
yeah.
This is exactly what I this is exactly what I want the podcast to be about. Just getting into like real life shit, talking about spirituality, philosophy, you know, how to approach life. I mean, that's even, you know, the name of the podcast is the Bushido podcast. And so Bushido is a term that means Bushi is like warrior in Japanese, and Do is the way, like Tao, like the Tao, that means the way. Do is in Japanese, it means the same thing. So the Bushido is basically like the way of the warrior. And my idea of
What? Because Budokon yoga, I don't know if you've looked into Budokon, but it's basically translates the same. So it has the same roots. Budokon, it also translates as the way of the warrior spirit. Anyway, I know I mentioned it to you before. Anyway,
yeah,
go
yeah.
on.
No, actually, I'm glad you brought that up. I do remember you mentioning that. Um, but my idea is basically like I wanted to get at the idea that like there is a way in this life that we can live like true and proper. And I mean, in English, we call it like the straight and narrow, like to live like on the straight and narrow. And maybe that doesn't capture the essence of the idea perfectly, but I just, if there's any message that I would want to get across to people, it's that there is a way that you can live in this life that leads to, at least in the Christian text, it's called the fruits of the spirit. So love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. It's like, you can talk about religion all you want, religion, that's kind of like its separate thing. But all I need to do to see into your life is like, are the fruits of the spirit manifesting in your life? Is love, is there love present in your life? Is there patience, peace, kindness, like all these things? And I feel like I'm not a patient person by nature, but it's something that I've cultivated by having a daily practice. Like when I'm feeling impatient, I have the self-awareness to say, like right now, I'm not going to say this impatient thing. I'm just going to have the self-awareness to take a deep breath and manifest patience into my life. And that's literally like, that's probably the closest we get. Experiences like that are the closest we get to tapping into like universal love and truth. Cause it's like, this is the universe. It's testing you right now. It's testing you, and it's giving you an opportunity to manifest a fruit of the spirit, patience, or you can take what would be the easy way. And that's more in my nature. And I'm not saying that's a completely bad thing. Like, this is the way I am. And there's aspects of my impatience that I value and that make me who I am. But there's also times where I don't want to manifest that impatience, and I manifest patience. And so I have the self-awareness and I'm connected to the universe, and I can say, you know what, I'm going to just take a moment and I'm going to manifest patience in this moment.
That's beautiful. Yeah, yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah, it's also things like, for me, the striving to be a good person has led for me to become like this stiff version of myself when I only can have like good emotions, positive emotions, and try to do the right thing to the like to the point when I would not even be myself completely. But if you know Tao or even Tantra, like, which is where yoga actually comes from before it became this like positive mind controlling a pure way, it was the what it actually teaches is that everything is good and everything is good, bad, and nothing is good and nothing is bad. So in a way, like, my natural expression is the Tao. So it's, even if it triggers someone, even if it triggers a trauma in someone, actually, like, I'm actually happy to do that, and not to just be a positive person, like be 100% positive. But the thing is, then there's like the awareness. We have to have the awareness of where does this emotion or this behavior come from, because very often we can also say like, okay, I'm just going to do this because this is the way I naturally react in this situation, but it's actually a trauma inside of us that is reacting in that way. So there's also that discernment. But ultimately, for me, the biggest challenge, and it might be also relevant for women mainly, because we are taught to be the good girl and to not stir too much emotions. But it was to like just liberate myself in that way, to also be okay with people not liking me, and be okay with maybe having anger or frustration and really feeling it, like really feeling those emotions. That was the biggest challenge for me, to learn to feel, not to like learn to be positive or learn to be like cultivate all these positive attributes, but to feel everything as it is. And I feel like that's the most important thing, for at least for me, but I think generally for people as well, is just to learn to feel feelings, feel emotions. And when we feel, we release.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's the people kind of confused, like, say you have someone that's like a stoic person, and like they would look at someone and say like, oh, that person doesn't feel. But I think for me, it's like I want to feel fully, but I also want to be completely in control of my behavior and my actions that arise out of those emotions. So I think anger is a great example. It's like I'm someone that I'm probably more prone to anger than the average person. And that's okay. I wouldn't want to be any other way, because sometimes being angry, like that is what drives me. Like that's anger is like a fire, like if you talk about me being
Mm.
focused, like I think part of that comes from like, you know what? I'm fucking pissed off about the way the world is and my situation, like where I'm at in life. And I'm so pissed off that I'm going to take action. You know what would suck is if I was just like a fucking amoeba. I was just like a little worm. Worms aren't angry. They're not doing shit. They're just crawling along, like my anger
Yes.
is my fire, and that's what drives me, and I wouldn't want it to be any other way. It's just that that can also be expressed in negative ways. Like I don't want to lose my temper and be like a little child that is, they don't have control of their emotions, you know so they're ruled by their emotions in a way, and that's not what I want. So it's just like you need to
Totally.
learn how to wield. You need to feel and wield this emotion. Sometimes when I get angry, it's like fuck yeah, like it's like haters. It's like use the haters, like use what they're giving you, because they're saying you're not going to amount to anything. You're not going to do anything. It's like, hell yeah, fuck you. Like that pisses me off. And I'm going to use that as motivation to get me going to be successful in life. But what you don't want is like, I'm angry, so I'm going to like say something mean to one of my loved ones, or I'm going to take it out on someone. You need to transform that from in its initial form. It's just like potential. It's just energy, and that energy can be expressed in a negative or a positive way. So it's up to us to feel these emotions and to channel them in a positive way, like, and that's what I was saying about my impatience. Like, it's the same idea of like, if I'm impatient to be successful, well, that's good. That's going to motivate me to take action. Like, okay, well, you're saying you want to do this thing, but you're not doing anything about it. So either shut up or take action. And I value that piece of my impatience for that, because it really pushes me to take action and improve my life and chase the things that I want. If you're just infinitely patient, you're like, no, I'll do it tomorrow. No, it's good. I'll do it tomorrow. And then you're just like 80 and you're like, oh, wow, I was so patient. I never tried to chase anything I ever wanted in life because I was so patient. It's like, no, that would be the opposite end of the extreme.
Mm.
Maybe that person needs to channel their, maybe they need to manifest more of that fire and more of that energy and the anger. So all to lead back to what you were saying, like, it's not to not feel. You don't want to be a piece of wood, or, I mean, wood is also organic. It feels in a way, you don't want to be just like, you don't want to just be a non-feeling organism. Like God gave us these feelings to feel for a reason. What makes us human is how you respond to those, because like if you're an animal, like they go on
Wow.
instinct, and it's like they react to their instinct, and that's what they do. As a human, you've been given this gift of consciousness, and that means you can have the self-awareness to
Yes.
say, wow, I'm pissed off, but you know what, I'm going to take a minute and channel this in a positive way. I think that's also like for me why jujitsu, like I need to go in and fight with other guys and get that out, because otherwise that is going to express itself in a negative way. So like that is just another form of channeling my being and channeling my energy. Like it needs to be channeled into a productive activity. Otherwise, I'm going to be in here like running around and saying crazy shit. So I think that's a perfect example.
I think that's why most people are actually insane. Like, because I know for me, if I did not channel in the movement, for me it's the same as well. I think that's maybe one of the like the easiest ways to channel those intense emotions. That's why people are just like, there's a beautiful metaphor like for this, and it's like it's anger or emotions. Like you have the pressure cooker, And if we don't release it from the top, it's going to seep through the sides. So it shows that as this passive aggression, for example, or just like little, it's just little things through this stiff yet kind of like manipulative. Did you record though? Not just so what I was saying basically, our emotions, if we don't release them in a healthy way, they're going to, like a pressure cooker, they're going to seep through the side, which is where it just starts to slowly toxicate our life.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, I agree. And whether it's, you know, via jujitsu or yoga or whatever it is, like I think it's up to every person to find what they need to do to express that. I mean, and it doesn't have to be a physical expression per se. I mean, for me at least, it does. I know in my case, like I need to move my body, and that mind body connection and the learning that happens at jujitsu, like, and the community that is part of it as well. Like that, I need all those things to help me process. And then I leave feeling like, wow, I feel really good. And I always train in the morning. So for me, it's like, I'm up, I'm training, you know, I take a cold shower at the end and I leave like, okay, I'm ready to take on the day. But you know, maybe it's art, drawing, who knows? Everyone, you know, it's up to each person to find that for themselves. But if you don't, it's like you said, I would be insane. You know, I would go nuts if I couldn't do that. So imagine, you know, like you're not getting sun, you're not walking, you're not training, you're not self-aware. And it's like when you consider all these things, because people just want to say, like, oh, well, the world's so crazy right nowadays. Why is that? But then when you look at, like, for me, all the things that I have to do to make sure that I feel good and aligned, and then you realize that most people aren't doing those, it's like, oh, okay, well, this actually makes a lot of sense, because if I wasn't doing these things, I would be lost, no doubt.
Yeah, totally, totally.
Alrighty. Well, honestly, I think maybe we can call it a wrap. That was really good. We really got into some heavy stuff, which I kind of anticipated, and it's great. We always end up talking about some good stuff. So yeah, Claudia, thank you so much for coming on. It was really an honor, and I would love to do it again.
Thank you, darling, for inviting me. It was my pleasure.
Cool. Let me just kick off the recording here.